Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jer and we're going to be continuing our discussion about Dead Like Me. We are in Season 2, Episode 13. This episode is called Last Call. It is fittingly appropriate that this episode is called Last Call and that it's a Mason-centric episode because typically Last Call is get your drinks because the bar is about to close, so get them while you can. It's fitting since Mason is an alcoholic. This episode is chock full of tons of Easter eggs and references to the lore that's been established in the series. We get to see the snapping turtles show up. And a couple episodes ago when George was in jail, there were the cheerleaders, they were the snapping turtle mascots. And during the episode where George was talking about how everybody's paired up, Crystal had a boyfriend that showed up that looked just like her, and Crystal's boyfriend shows up again. We get little references like that throughout the entire episode. It's all about endings. It's hard for people to say goodbye, which is typically why they have going away parties. And in Happy Time, they're having a goodbye celebration for one of their coworkers whose name is Brian. Do you want to come see the people? Another one of those little Easter eggs that we get in this episode is with Misty and how she's kind of like the office pump. She makes out with one coworker and is like, I'm really gonna miss you, Brian. And then the real Brian shows up and then she leads him away. Which I feel like if that were to happen in a real office, there'd be some talks about sexual harassment. There'd be courses for the entire company and somebody would be fired. So Brian ends up stealing some money from Dolores after she had planned this really nice party and George kicks his butt. And then he tried to say that he was diabetic and that didn't mean anything, so she just kicked him out of Happy Time. Which, there'd probably be a lawsuit after the fact. Mason shows up and tells George that, you know, Rube is always saying, stay on the periphery and not get involved with the living and stay away from old lives and everything. And Mason basically tells her, like, that's all BS. Do what you want. You know, go out and hold everybody that is close to you and be there for them. So she ends up going home. And this has been a build-up that they've been working towards for several episodes. This is one of the most, I think, upsetting and tragic moments in the entire series, is JD gets hit by a car. We don't see it happen on screen, but we see George show up in the aftermath. And the Pet Reaper, Charlie, shows up, which is another Easter egg because we haven't seen him in a couple of episodes. And he's there to get JD's soul, and they run off. And in the end, George feels bad about everything that happened, so she gives her frog to Reggie. And this frog has been closely tied with George since the first episode, so for her to give it away is kind of a big deal as far as the show is concerned. But she left the frog at the door in the same way that she left JD and another nice little Easter egg. It almost feels like elements of this episode were supposed to be maybe like a clip show, but maybe that got scrapped last minute, so they decided to throw in all these little references that they normally don't do. And then since we're on Reggie, we'll kind of go backwards. She gets to be home alone and she doesn't have to be supervised. And Reggie's home alone with JD and she lets him have some chocolate, and we are led to believe that JD might die from eating all this chocolate ice cream, but it ends up being kind of red herring. And Claire leaving the gate open, as has been mentioned several times, she lets him out for the last time. I finally remembered, and I don't know why it didn't click until this episode, but I finally remember where Claire was from. She was from the very first episode when Reggie was stealing toilet seats, and I forgot that she was the neighbor who showed up and said that Reggie stole her toilet seat. And I don't know why it took so long for me to connect those dots, but I finally remembered it when Claire bent down and told Reggie, you can come over anytime you want, just don't steal my toilet seat. This is also a good episode because we get a lot of Roxy focus, and anytime we get her in it, I'm always very happy. She shows up quite a few times. She has a pretty substantial reap that she goes and gets all these people on a bus, which when you think about the implications of that are pretty tragic, because the bus driver is getting high because he gets nervous about driving, and presumably he crashes the bus and they all die. So Roxy ends up showing up at Daisy's house and she's got some information. She's looking for Ray, and the people that he works with filed a missing persons report. And she notices the blood on the carpet and she kind of tells Daisy, like, clean up this blood because it's gonna be here forever if you don't take it out. And she leaves and she kind of is suspicious. She obviously knows what happened, that Ray's dead. and that Daisy and Mason have been acting so weird all day because they did something to cause that death. In the end of the episode, she tells Daisy that Ray was last seen in Portland. So she's using her police connections to kind of fake evidence to get the scent off the group. And I think that's largely in part to what Tiffany told her earlier that night, is that you don't get to choose your family. And as much as they bother her and as much as they annoy her because they're not as good at their job as she is, she doesn't really get a choice that she has to work with them, that they are essentially a family, and she's gonna take care of them the way that she has been shown to. And I think that's why I like Roxy's presence in this episode so much, because she's always kind of been motherly to the group, whether she realizes it or not. And to see her taking care of them, I think was a really sweet moment, and I like that we get so much of her. So then lastly, talking about Daisy and Mason. Daisy is getting some flack from George in their Waffle House because she tracked some mud around the house, and she ends up going back to go clean it up. But she and Mason are acting really weird, and they obviously are having a hard time with this death that they caused, and Daisy is having this existential crisis because she feels like it's her fault. Everything that's happened in her life that's been bad, she feels like it's her fault. George comes back and tells her that JD died, and Daisy says it's probably my fault. And she's internalizing all of this grief, and it's that thing that's been discussed and teased at and tiptoed around through the last season and a half, that Daisy has something that she is painfully sad about, and it's never quite dug up, but here we see more of that, where she's very clearly torturing herself all the time about the things that she has done and the things that she continues to do, that she feels like any bad thing is her cause and her doing. And then with Mason, he's frazzled. He's completely frazzled about killing Ray. I don't know if he's even hurt anybody seriously before, and he's not able to cover it up. He tries to tell this story that he was bowling, and he fumbles about it, and he spits coffee on Rube, and he's just a mess because he did this horrible thing, and now he thinks he's being punished. And they're talking about what they would have done on their last days, and they're all saying the things that they would have done, and Mason's basically like, I would have gotten really drunk and really high and just done what I always do. And he feels like this is the end, so he decides that he's got to just do the most drastic thing possible, and he wants to take care of Daisy. On her last day, she would have wanted to get engaged and have a ring, so he consults Tiffany to make sure it's his last day on Earth, and she allegedly is a palm reader, and she tells him that on your last day you'll see a crescent moon in the day, and he sees this little crescent-shaped cookie, and he starts looking around their Waffle House, and he's seeing all these endings. You know, somebody pulls the last napkin, somebody gets the last little drop of coffee, and he's sure that this is the end for him, so he calls it last call. He sells all of his stuff, and we get another Easter egg with the kitchen guillotine. It shows up for the very last time at his little yard sale that he's having on somebody else's yard. He presumably sells his house. He gets rid of everything and invests it all into this beautiful ring that he gives to Daisy. And then he goes up to his reap, which is up in the mountains, possibly the same place that they filmed the vacation episode, or even Ghost Stories, which is another little Easter egg because we don't see this location because it is very far out of the way. This guy is up there, and Mason tells him that he's gonna die and that this is his last day on Earth. And the two of them go swimming, and they get zapped by lightning. And when he comes back, he realizes it wasn't his last day, that this purple post-it that he thought signified the end of days was just because they ran out of yellow post-its at Office Hut, which I had to giggle at, that they've been using post-it so freely throughout the entire series, but they couldn't get the rights to say Office Depot or something like that to have as a place that Rube got his post-its from. I think they've even used Walmart before, so like it makes me laugh that they've been using this right so freely, and then they just come up with some random office supply place that Rube gets his post-its from. It's no more than that. They just didn't have any more post-its, and he in fact is not being punished, which is a relief for him, but now he realizes there's consequences to his actions. He doesn't have a place to live anymore. He doesn't have money. He's got nothing. And George has a very sweet moment with him as she's sitting there with him, just kind of scratching his head, and she's telling him, you know, you can stay with us as long as you need, and I don't really care if it takes a long time. and we're gonna see the consequences of her decision in the next 2 episodes. But it's just a overall very sweet moment that they have together. So I have a couple favorite quotes from this episode. The first one is from Daisy, and it's near the beginning where she and Mason are talking about coming up with this lie that they have to tell the group so that nobody realizes that they killed Ray, which they end up basically telling everybody but Rube. And Daisy says that, you know, when you come up with a lie, it has to be like a little black dress. Short, simple, classic, unforgettable. And then my second quote is from Mason, which I use the kind of last bit quite frequently, but when he's talking to Tiffany, George tells me that you're a palm reader, that you're psychotic. The last one is from Roxy, and it's such a short little quote. She's describing Ray, and she's describing the things that he's done that he's obviously a bad guy for, that he's committed fraud, assault, and a bad haircut. Nothing super huge from Dolores. I do enjoy her and her teeny weeny comment about how Murray almost choked to death. Overall, very, very good episode. We're doing the thing. We're almost to the end of this. We're almost to the end. There's only 2 left and then the movie. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.